It is, I believe, 2:41, and most of the cats have been herded back into the room here. Hopefully the cats online are back at their stations as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Russ and Bob. Okay. So Ron, you're the spotlight guy.
Yep, we're ready.
Okay. Thanks, guys. And everybody, please welcome back Bob Frank Rowan. You know, in the past, I guess it's been right there at the 600 room that he's given some pretty enjoyable talks on tourist railroads that he's visited when he was TDY up in the Northeast. So today, I think this should be as fun and interesting about Railway Museums, Volume 1. So, Bob, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you, Russ. You're very kind. I wanted to be with you guys in the 600 room today, but I've been in the classroom the last couple of weeks. I substitute teach at Trinity and Sacred Heart, and COVID is running rampant, so I didn't want to take a chance and come out and either infect anybody or myself become infected. So I'm doing it Zoom. Hopefully next month I'll be able to join in person. So today's title is a little bit of a misnomer. Volume 1 assumes that there's a Volume 2, and of course there is not. I guess depending on how well received this one is, will determine whether or not I put together a second volume. So always like to start off with disclaimers so that people know what they're going to get. I am definitely not an aficionado on railway museums. I simply like to visit them to enjoy their many unique artifacts. And my second disclaimer is that some of the photos in this presentation are digital scans from 35 millimeter slides, and they are not up to my usual standards. So I caution everybody up front, and I apologize for some of the pictures that aren't as good as I would like them to be. So this afternoon's agenda, we will visit 5 railway museums in 4 different states. We're going to take a look at the Illinois Railway Museum up in Union, Illinois, just sort of a little bit northwest of Chicago. The Shoreline Trolley Museum in East Haven, Connecticut. We're going to swing by the Empire State Railway Museum in Phoenicia, New York. This place was really crazy, got to tell you. Sono Switch Tower Museum in Norwalk, Connecticut. And final stop will be the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum in Campo, California. So our first stop is the Illinois Railway Museum. To orient you where it's located, you can see Chicago in the lower right part of the screen. You're about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending on traffic outside of town. It's a very large complex. They do offer various trolley rides. They offer a train ride that I think runs out the line that runs up to the top left of the screen there, and then just come on back. It's a fantastic place, and I would say that anybody that has an opportunity to visit really should. When I first pulled up, I've been there a couple of times, but on my first visit, I pulled up, parked the car, got out, and this is the first thing I saw. This is the Nebraska Zephyr, and it was a sunny day. Again, this was long ago. This was a slide. The slide is 10 times more brilliant than the scan, but when I photographed this thing, it was just glistening in the bright sunshine. The stainless steel shell was just fantastic. I mean, it immediately put me back into the 1940s, 1950s when I saw it. They were actually making it ready. They were doing a dinner train excursion that night. And so they were, you can see the guys, they were doing some things. They were loading it up with food and what have you. But this was just such a treat. I could have just stopped there and spent the whole day staring at that thing. It was really fantastic. And of course, they have all sorts of locomotives, everything from steam to somewhat modern day diesels, at least the Class 2 diesels. This is their 1630 is their operating steam. You can see how they load coal into the tender. And there it is under power. All sorts of diesels. I believe this is some type of E8, if I'm not mistaken. Really just looks fresh out of the paint shop. They do a lot of restoration work here, as many museums do. This is one of the Union Pacifics. I believe this is one of the turbo locomotives. You can see the length of that thing. You know, and the only place you can see these things today, obviously, are in museums like this. So I'm really glad that there are places that preserve, you know, this part of our American history. This is looks like an F-45 unit, and I took a picture of this. Of course, it's in the Santa Fe War Bonnet scheme, but I have a model of this that I painted up into the Southern fantasy scheme when we had our little fantasy scheme contest, or not contest, but displays. I always like to see things that I've, you know, have on my layout at home. I like to see them in the actual prototype, because again, you can't see them on the lines today. You have to see them in museums. That's a DD-40 Union Pacific. Huge rotary snowplow. Looks like another brand new restored wood sheathed caboose, fresh out of the paint shop. And, you know, typical of any railroad museum is they have a lot of just yards that have various cars of various years, makes, models. And it's just fun for me to go around and, you know, see what's there, take pictures and say, yeah, I have one of these cabooses or a very similar one on my layout, you know. So this was a car that you saw earlier today. Congratulations to Ed on his second place finish. Very excellent model, well deserving. And of course, you can see that car in person at the museum. Now, I did not see it the particular visit I was there. This is their stock photo, but it is located at the museum. And you can bet that the next time I go back, I will be on the lookout for that car, because I think Ed's model was spot on. It was really an excellent piece of work. And there's also a lot of just derelict equipment that's floating around. I don't think these locomotives run. They may never run again. I don't know. Maybe they have some refurbishment plans. All kinds of maintenance away equipment. This one caught my eye, particularly because, you know, Athearn made a model of this, and I happen to have my L&N version on my layout. So that's fun. And I'm always amazed. For some reason, I'm drawn to track work. I mean, there's obviously not a single car in this photograph, but I just love track work. It's just something I enjoy. And so I snapped this photo of tracks leading back to the barns. So this is one of the trolleys they had. They have a huge loop of track. So this thing sort of encircles the entire museum. And you can see it's very well restored, nice fresh paint. They keep these things up very nicely. And also on the interior, I think I have an interior shot. Yeah. So if you notice up here on the side walls, they have all the advertisements that would have been particular to that period of time. And so it's fun to see all the old ads, and I don't know how they were able to get, you know, fresh prints, because you know, they're not aged. They're you know, look like they're just freshly put up. I'm sure they were, but certainly of products that some of them no longer around, and it's just fun to see all that. So they did a good job of doing a period piece on the interior of this thing. One of the more modern locomotives looks like an SD-40. All kinds of stuff. Was at Burlington Northern in the back, again, just fresh out of the paint shop, it appears. So you really feel old when you're in a museum and you take a picture of a shot and you realize that when you were in high school, this is what I rode into the city of Chicago. I went to high school in Chicago, transferred from St. X, went up to Chicago with my dad. So I remember riding this thing, and it was so neat. And here it is now, 50 years after the fact, and they preserved it. So it had some, I really loved seeing this there. I remember those cars, those double deck cars with the doors right in the center there. I just remember that vividly. In fact, just to date myself, we took that train into Chicago to see the ticker tape parade for the original Apollo astronauts, first astronauts on the moon, Bud Aldrin and Mike Collins and all those guys, those three guys. So that's the train we took in. Another shot of the Burlington Northern. They were doing some switching maneuvers, so it was fun watching that. An old switch tower. And there's all sorts of, just relics that they put around here, a little signal. And they've got a whole wall of the various types of semaphore signals and various light operated signals. Again, this sand tower caught my attention because I have a very similar one on my layout. So this was my second trip there, and they had the Nebraska Zephyr inside the shed. And of course, when they're inside the shed, the lighting's not very good. It's not near as impressive as when it's out in the bright sunshine. But you get to walk up close and in up close and in person. You can climb on them, you can inspect them. So it's really nice. You got some pretty large locomotives there. All right, so we're going to leave Illinois and we're going to travel to the Shoreline Trolley Museum, which is in East Haven, Connecticut. Again, just a little bit northeast of New York City. When I was up there, when I was stationed up there, I lived about 50 miles, 60 miles due west on Highway 80. So I was right here where my cursor is. So it's not that far of a drive for me. So there's an aerial view, and this is on the coast in a little estuary type arrangement. So it's really nice. So you pull up, that's the trolley that's waiting to take the passengers into the museum. You have to traverse, maybe a quarter mile or so to get back into the museum area. That's the depot where you buy your tickets. Again, these things are very well maintained, very well kept. So this guy, I can't remember, there was a Louisville connection here. So while we're waiting for the people to board, and the guy's asking where everybody's from, and I said I was from Louisville, Kentucky, and he says, I think he said his wife was from Louisville, Kentucky. So no matter where you go, there always seems to be a little local hometown connection. So once again, you can see a better picture of some of the advertisements up here, period advertisements, what would be appropriate for that time. They do a great job. The woodwork is pristine. It's really fantastic how they preserve these things. So it's a lot of fun. You try to imagine what it was like, 60, 70, 80 years ago. So now he's taking us back into the museum. Again, it's a little estuary type arrangement where you got little fingers of water coming in and out. And there's a walking path here. You could also walk back there. It's about a quarter-mile walk. In fact, I rode the trolley in and then I walked back just to kind of take it all in. That's some of the just sights you see going back there. So now we've reached the museum. They let you off, and I love this because you have free access to roam, take pictures of anything, go anywhere. Unlike if you try to rail fan a functioning railroad today, you get 1 foot on their property and they'll want to throw you behind bars. So it's really lovely to just be unencumbered, untethered when you're visiting these places. Again, I just love track work, and I especially love track work that's buried in either asphalt or gravel or something like that. It's just one of my fetishes, I guess. So you couldn't have a trolley museum without, of course, having the streetcar named Desire. And these things mostly were housed in barns, so it's a little tight and can't get great photographs, but it's fun. And there's a piece, they do restoration work, obviously. There's a piece that's undergoing some kind of restoration. There are trolleys of every type. And I'm not an expert. I'm not sure I know the difference between the trolley and a streetcar. I mean, to me, they're one and the same, but I know they're not the same. And they're in remarkable shape. That's what amazes me. I love the old style car barn here with the large doors that are sort of angled at the top and that false front for the electric railway, the Branford Electric Railway. So after my visit, I said, well, I'll walk back on the path. Gorgeous day. I'm still in pretty good shape. So I took the walk back. Some beautiful scenery up on the East Coast area, especially in the summertime. All right, 2 down, 3 to go. So our third stop is the Empire State Railway Museum. This place is incredible. So, and I just kind of happened upon this. I was actually a little bit south, riding a little tourist railroad, and somebody said, well, have you been up to the museum? It's only about a 20-minute drive. And I said, well, yeah, I'm all the way up here in the Catskills. So what's another 20 minutes? So just to orient you, this is the Catskill Mountain area, sort of a summer, what used to be years ago, summer getaway for New Yorkers. It used to be a big region, had a lot of entertainment up there and celebrities and all, and they had camps and this, that, and the other. Not as much today, but it's still a very, very beautiful area. So I rode to this place, found it, and I wasn't even sure what it was. I mean, this thing looked like it had really fallen on the hard times. I mean, it almost looked abandoned to me. I mean, just look at some of the track there. You know, maybe they're trying to replace some of the ties. I don't know, but the whole thing was just like, I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. I mean, you can see how remote it is. You can see the tracks are hardly visible. You got a boxcar way in the background here, just kind of rotting away. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason whatsoever. I had more fun here just because it was so different than anything else I had been to. I actually love this. Looks like ties, every other tie is missing, more than every other tie is missing on this piece of track. And you can see the weeds all overgrown here. I mean, this is just, again, it looked like abandoned, but it was actually open and, had operating hours and so on and so forth. And I think you just walk in. I don't remember having to purchase a ticket. Of course, contrast this picture to some of the cabooses that I photographed in the Illinois Railway Museum that were nice, again, right out of the paint shop. These things look like they've just been sitting derelict for years. And there's something attractive about that. I mean, that's just, they're really interesting, especially if you wanted to model a derelict piece of equipment and weather it. I mean, look at all the rust, look at all the broken out windows. I mean, the weeds growing up around it. And this thing's a mess. I mean, golly, it's just deteriorating all to hell. I don't think I'd ever seen an exterior braced boxcar before. I've seen them in kits, but I don't think I've ever seen one in the prototype. And there it is. And I really thought this was an interesting car. It looks funny to me because the braces it's not a smooth side. And that's the other side of it. It's, again, I guess it's just sitting there deteriorating. I don't know if there's ever going to be any plans to restore. So they did have a piece of maintenance equipment there. They do have a little depot there. There are some cars other than mine. So there were people there came to visit. But again, most of it was overgrown, weeds, appeared to be abandoned, like this little shed here. And there was that one boxcar that was just sitting way out. I mean, what a weathering job. I mean, it's just, there's no paint at all. It's just all rust. I mean, it's fantastic. So there's some of the museum that it does have a little bit of life to it, I guess. I mean, at least they have ties for the rail. And this was an adjoining property. I don't know if this guy was in any way affiliated with the property, the museum, excuse me, but he had a little live steamer thing, not live steam, but he had a railroad that the kids seemed to enjoy riding on. So I just took a photograph of it. Anyway, strange place. I was happy I went, had a great time there. I wouldn't know if I'd recommend it to anybody to go out of the way. Like I said, I was only 20 minutes down the road from it. So now on to our fourth stop, which is the SONO, that stands for South Norwalk Switch Tower Museum. It's located in Norwalk, Connecticut. And that's an overall view. It's a 3-story tower because the train line is elevated. A lot of congestion in the Northeast. So any train that goes through any city, for the most part, seems to be elevated to get it off the road so it's not blocking any traffic, as was the case here. So there's the tower. And I'm not a fan of heights. I'm a little bit shaky when it comes to heights. So the hardest part of this trip was climbing these external stairs for me. But I did manage to climb them. And a well-preserved switch tower with all the switch mechanisms still in place, and very well maintained, very well kept. And I think I had never seen, other than in a magazine, I'd never been to an actual switch tower where they had all the levers and things like that. This was our docent for the day. Interesting story about this guy in the blue shirt. This tower operated well into the 70s, I think maybe late 70s, early 80s. It was still a functioning tower. This gentleman, who's about my age, had a summer job while he was in college working in this tower. And so now, full circle, he's long since retired, and he comes back as a docent to volunteer his time and show people how it used to be. And what better docent than having somebody who actually did the job as a summer job during college. So I thought that was really neat. In fact, and on the second level, they had some archival photographs, and he was in them, working, doing whatever he was doing as a 20-year-old college student. So I thought that was kind of neat. So it gave him a map of everything. Some very ancient interlocking switch equipment, relays, what have you. And again, to think about, this was operating well into the 70s and into maybe the early 80s. I forget, I can't remember the data that they told that day. So there are the tracks, four main lines. The Northeast Corridor, as many of you rail fans know, is a very busy place, and with a lot of passengers. You don't see many passenger trains going through Louisville. You don't see any, but maybe Derby time. But in the Northeast, you have them all the time, and as well as freight traffic. And so you can see the 4 main lines. And then they just continue on north, with one branching out to the west. That's the small town of Norwalk, looking down from the tower. That's looking up at the bridge. I think I'm on street level there, or maybe on a little platform, not quite down the street level. So there's the tower from the other side of the tracks. You can see why it had to be 3 stories tall, because it had to get elevated above the track. So now I'm definitely at street level, and there's the tower in the background there. And everything's all electric going through here. Again, heavy congestion, I guess, back in the steam era, they didn't want all the pollution, or even with modern day diesels, all the pollution. So everything seems to be electric. And our 5th and final stop, we're going to go all the way across country to California, to the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum, in a little town called Campo, California. This is the second time I was actually here. The first time I was here, we used to go to San Diego. That's where the Navy fleet has a big yard in San Diego. It's the major West Coast yard, or dock, I should say. And so we go there on business from time to time. And I'd always, if I was there over a weekend, I'd make the trip down to Campo. But anyway, years ago, it used to be the San Diego Railway Museum, even though it was located about an hour and a half, maybe 2-hour drive from San Diego. That was the original name. So to orient you, just north of the Mexican border, San Diego over here. And the very first time I made this trip, and I took the interstate out of San Diego, Interstate 8 or whatever, and then I took some 2-lane roads down, and there was no signage anywhere. And this was pretty deserted country, semi-arid, almost desert-like. And I kept driving, and I knew I was heading south, and I knew that this place was very close to Mexico. And at one point, I thought, have I entered? Have I crossed the border? Was there no border crossing? I mean, because it just seemed like I kept driving and driving and driving, and I didn't come to it. So fortunately, eventually I did, and but it's really close to the Mexican border. In fact, one of the excursions that it takes you on, it takes you up to the border, and you can't go any further, and then you just backtrack. So anyway, so there it is, an aerial view. Again, not unlike or typical of many railway museums. They've got a big yard with a lot of equipment, some of it functional, some of it rusting, some of it waiting to be restored, some of it in restoration process. That was the my first trip there. No name or anything on the depot. And then I guess when they renamed it, rebranded it, they put, you know, we better put, like most stations have a location, right? So it's Campo, California, and you're 65.8 miles from San Diego, and I can't make out the other town. It was a very sunny, warm day, typical of Southern California, and they had a very nice crowd turnout, which surprised me somewhat. You know, I'm a railroad buff, so I'm not a railroader and railroad fan. So it's natural that I would take this trip to this little out of the way place to ride a train, but all these other people were here as well. And I thought that was, you know, that bodes well for scenic railways, because it, you know, so long as there's people that still have interest, then I guess you'll still see these things operating and preserving the history. So that was the inside of the car, complete with its own portal potty here. Very nice. A very arid area. The roadbed appeared to be, rather than gravel, it appeared to be just sand. In fact, there's a separate presentation I've done in the past. It's on slides. I need to convert it over, about the building of this railroad. And they coined it the Impossible Railroad because of some of the rugged terrain and the 110-degree temperatures they had to work with building it. But you can see, I don't see any gravel at all in the roadbed. It's really, you know, just very sandy. You can't even see the ties. So they just take you out to the end of the line, run around, and then they pull you back. Again, I said it's semi-arid. They do get some rainfall, as evidenced by some of the greenery here, trees and what have you. That's kind of like in a little valley area there. And they do have cattle grazing, okay? But it's a beautiful, you can see it's very remote. Other than the ranchers, there isn't a whole lot around here. On the way back, he stops the train and lets you get out at the yard, those who wanted to get out and not ride back to the station. And of course, I hopped off, took a picture of the track work because I enjoy doing that. And then you have your free reign to go anywhere you want to go and photograph anything you want to photograph, climb on anything you want to climb on. And it's just wonderful to be able to do that without somebody saying, you know, what you doing, son? Just all kinds of pieces of equipment. I love this, the old time cattle car. And this one looks made of steel as opposed to wood. So this was sort of a relic from God knows when, but I just loved how this thing looked with all the boarded up windows and all the faded paint, and just a complete disaster, but it looked neat. So you can see here's a contrast between the caboose on the left, which is very pristine, 13936, and then the one that needs a little bit of work, the old wooden caboose on the right here. So you see equipment in all different stages. So there's somebody who really loves his work. Guy inside doing whatever he's doing with some lacquer thinner, it looks like. you know, museums, as Charlie Bucola will tell you, since he's active in the Kentucky Railway Museums, the the lifeblood of any museum are its volunteers. And so here's a guy, this was on a Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, and here's a guy drove all the way out to Campo, maybe from San Diego, and he's buried himself in his work, and nobody's paying him to be there. So, you know, my hat's off to people like that, people like Charlie, who really dedicate themselves to the preservation of America's railroad history. They had a docent there that day who was talking about how they're somewhat close proximity to Hollywood, Los Angeles not being that far from San Diego. He says they're always getting requests to use their steam locomotive. In fact, the one that's on the left of the screen, 2353, was used most recently, or at least at the time I was there, in the movie Pearl Harbor with Ben Affleck. And it was the steam locomotive that drove the troops into town or whatever. And so they had a shot in it. And it's really nice for the museum because, you know, Hollywood pays very well. They have deep pockets, and if they want a steam locomotive, they're willing to pay for it. So it's great that they can take advantage of that and get those things on film. And again, there's plenty of equipment just sitting there, for the most part, resting. So this is, I love open loads, as you all know. So this is a unique open load. If you hesitate to guess what that is, it is a turntable. It plans to install a turntable. Where do you get your equipment? Well, the U.S. Army says, I don't need this anymore. And what better way to repurpose it than to donate it to a museum? That's the second time I was there. My wife joined me. We were out there on a business trip, and she joined me for the weekend, or for the week, actually. The second time, the excursion went south as opposed to east, excuse me. And similar but different terrain. Different looking roadbed. You can see little bit of gravel there. It looks freshly manicured. And this is the one where they take you right up. On the other side of that tunnel is the Mexican border. And he explained what that, you can see looking in the tunnel, that's the I guess, border guard, making sure nobody crosses. So don't know how that operation works, but he didn't dare go any further. I think we might have pulled out onto the trestle. I can't remember. And then we just turned around and came back. But you can see, you know, building a railroad through this, when the temperatures, you know, it's just during the summertime, 110, 115, even 120 degrees are possible. So it's very difficult working conditions. One of the mail cars. There's that same cattle car there several years later. I don't know how big the gap was from my first visit to my second visit. Track without ballast for all of you people who don't ballast your track. You can just say it's part of a museum. I think I have, or at one time I had a model of this car, Hathorn model of this car on my layout, of course, in fully fresh paint scheme and all that. So I love the weathering. They still haven't installed the turntable. They just moved it to sort of behind the building here. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of my presentation. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope it wasn't too painful, and I hope maybe you learned a few things. I've enjoyed myself, and I can only hope you did as well. Thank you very much.
It's 3:30. That's about time. We need to wrap up. We've got some things to do here in the room afterwards. And then we've got a contest or an AP judging to look at and a couple other things to do. It's been a great afternoon. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Bob Franckrone, for that fun tour. Absolutely.
Thank you. You guys are very kind. I appreciate that.
And Gordy, thank you for spending our afternoon, your evening with us. We really appreciate you jumping in here and speaking with us and giving us some insights and things that we might not otherwise know. All right, we're going to shut the Zoom meeting down and we are officially done for the day. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll have the video online in a couple days.